Welcome to Career Practitioner Conversations. This podcast is presented by the National Career Development Association. Hello and welcome to NCDA's podcast. I'm Melissa Venable, NCDA Director of Professional Development, and this episode focuses on Disability Pride Month. I'm excited to host this conversation with Ken Meeker. Ken is an active writer, speaker, and podcaster, and a certified professional coach, providing services through his company, Vitality Career Coaching LLC. Ken is also a member of NCDA's Diversity Initiatives and Cultural Inclusion Committee and a recent graduate of NCDA's Leadership Academy. So welcome to the podcast, Ken.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
We're so glad to have you here. When you reached out to me about a possible episode, you made me aware of Disability Pride Month. So could you share more about what that is and maybe a little bit about how it came to be?
Sure. Disability Pride Month is celebrated the entire month of July. And really what it is geared towards is creating awareness about people living with disabilities. And it's not to celebrate the disability per se, but the individual with the disability. It started on the 25th anniversary of the passage of the ADA. So just in 2015 was the first year that it was really adopted and used across, not, and now it's expanded to globally, where it's something that is recognized and celebrated.
I'm so glad you're here to kind of make us all aware of that. And it's July, correct? Is
Correct.
it July? We're coming in on the end of the month for this year. But so what can listeners do to support this initiative for the rest of the month of July and maybe even extend the focus in their work for the rest of the year?
Well, more so than anything, it's about awareness that, 1 in 4 Americans has a disability, which is quite a lot of people. And a lot of people either have invisible disabilities or they hide or they try to blend in, just so that they don't have to be othered within society. And so Disability Pride Month is to create awareness that we're everywhere and so that we, to be seen. I am personally, I have a disability. I'm legally blind. I have very, very limited vision. But, upon appearances, most people wouldn't necessarily assume that because I look, relatively, quote unquote normal unless I'm using my cane or somebody's really paying attention to, the size of my font and when I'm trying to read something or whatever. But it should be about just accepting people where they are, letting people be, flourish. And that's really what it's about. And that's July is a month to really, get it out there that we're everywhere and we just want to be equal participants in society, but it's something that should happen, year round.
Absolutely. I love that we're going to kind of take this from the end of the month into the future. So hopefully this will make a lot of people aware, as you mentioned. Disabilities are everywhere and you don't necessarily see them. What are some of the top resources that career development professionals should be using that they can refer to that relate to disabilities or abilities in the job search?
Certainly. So one of the things, and I touched on this at conference, is, use your network and connect with people. You don't have to know it all. Nobody does, right? But having an awareness, especially if you're in career development or you're a career practitioner, you should have, just as a baseline, some resources that you can go to for areas that aren't necessarily your specialty. I don't think every career practitioner or everybody in general needs to be an expert on all things disability. I'm not an expert on all things disability. It just happens to be an area of focus for me. There's places like Ask Jan, which is a tremendous resource. And there's, in every single state, there's usually multiple organizations that are resources that, a career practitioner could reach out to and be like, hey, I'm a career practitioner. I'm working with a client that has such and such disability. I'm looking for resources for them. Can you help me out? That's really the extent of what I would expect a career practitioner to do in terms of being proactive. But what often happens is people with disabilities just get passed on to somebody else. And then they just get passed on to somebody else and they get passed on to somebody else. And so the issue is never really addressed and dealt with, and the person never gets what they need. And that's a huge problem.
What I really appreciate from that response, Ken, is you're saying we have permission, right? To not to know all the answers, to not have all the expertise, and that's okay. It's one of those, the guidelines we tend to give people as career practitioners. You don't have to know all the answers. You can say, I don't know.
Absolutely.
right? And
Absolutely.
that's really a very good thing to say when you really don't know what's next or what's needed.
Yeah, you don't have to have all the answers, and it's okay to sometimes get it wrong. I think that that's, something that a lot of people do in general, not just career practitioners, but it happens everywhere, especially like in the workplace. People are so afraid to get something wrong or to say something wrong, and so they do nothing instead. And that's the worst thing that you can do, because then nothing happens because nothing is said. Of course, it's, you always want to approach things with sensitivity and kindness, and, but if you don't know, you don't know. And if you don't ask a question, how are you supposed to know? And so I think that that's, something really important, as a career practitioner. Don't assume somebody doesn't have a disability. There's a sensitive and proactive and kind way to ask that question that respects the individual, but also allows the career practitioner to really provide what that client needs. Because like if you were just to see me, you're not going to assume I have a disability and that my needs are going to be different unless I disclose, and I'm only going to disclose if I feel comfortable. And so as a career practitioner, one of the things is just have a way, and it's a one size fits all approach never works. But in whatever way, in whatever capacity you work, because it'd be different for, somebody who works in colleges versus private practice, ask a question where, is there anything that's important that needs to be addressed? Are there accommodations that you might need? There are sensitive ways of asking these questions that
Mm-hmm.
addresses the issue. And that's something that needs to happen a lot more frequently, I think.
It's great advice, and really advice we can all take to our next conversation with whoever we're meeting with in our offices. For those who want to get more training, who want to become more skilled
Mhm.
in working with students and clients who have disabilities, need accommodations, are there places you could recommend?
Absolutely. So there's a few. So if you work for like an organization, like let's say a college, or where there's multiple career practitioners, or there's several people that can participate in a workshop, Ask Jan will actually work with an organization to facilitate training about what they offer, what's available on their website, etc. And it's free; it's of no cost, and they'll just work with you to do that, which is an amazing thing that they do. And I've helped to facilitate them before. They'll meet you where you're at in terms of an organization, in terms of what you're looking for help. Like how can Ask Jan support your organization, whatever it is. For individuals that are in private practice or they're solo, like myself, the ADA National Network has a ton of free trainings. Some of them are like webinars, and then there's other ones that are just self-guided sort of trainings. And sometimes they'll count towards becoming a certified ADA coordinator, which I am. But it's just really good, education and training. So, some of it's on like sensitivity and language and you know uh, accessible spaces. It covers a wide range of topics, and almost all of it is free. Like Rocky Mountain ADA Center has a ton of online self-guided training that people can take.
It's fantastic to hear that there's stuff out there we can try and see which direction we want to head in, and then if we want to move on from there. And we'll have links to these resources in our show notes. So if you're listening and you want to find out more, just check that out to click and learn more about these programs. Ken, I want to shift gears a little bit.
Sure.
When you brought this topic to me, absolutely, we want to bring this on. And you and I have spoken in different contexts and different places over the last year. So, as many of us are aware, DEI programs in general, sort of many of these came about during a lot of the social justice movement of the last 4 years or so. And we're seeing those programs go through changes. Some are being reduced, being renamed. Even in some industries and locations, they're just being
Yeah.
done away with completely. So what is your insight on what's happening right now?
I'm really, 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 really happy that you asked this question. It's very relevant, especially with SHRM recently changing their, um, dropping the E from their DEI uh, initiatives, saying that equity is just part of inclusion. And I could not disagree more. I feel very strongly about this, that equity is the ultimate goal of any diversity, equity, inclusion program, whatever you want to call it. Equity is the goal, because what it means is every person, every individual has what they need as an individual to thrive and to be on par with everyone else. So like, one of the older images that gets used is an image of three people of different heights looking at looking over a fence at a basketball or at a baseball game. And while it's sort of a introduction to what equity is, because then they give them boxes and then everybody can see over the fence. Somebody brought it to my attention that that's not really that's one of the problems with DEI is actually what that picture represents, because something is being taken away from one of the tallest person in the image, if you're familiar with the image, and given to the person that is the shortest. So that zero sum perspective is exactly what that image portrays. Something's being taken away from the tallest person, given to the shortest person so that they can see over the fence. That's not equity. That's zero sum. Equity is letting everybody have the box that they had initially, but giving the person that's shortest and can't see over the fence whatever it is that they need to be able to see over the fence. Doesn't take away from anyone else. And that's what equity really is. It's meeting people where they are, making sure that they have what they need to thrive. And I think that by SHRM changing, dropping the E, they have done a huge disservice to people that have disabilities, especially people that have disabilities, because equity is exactly what accommodations are about.
Do you have any recommendations for folks that are listening, who are working in career development positions, who find themselves in organizations that are drawing back from their DEI initiatives? What kind of advice would you give those folks right now?
Let them know why it's important, because it doesn't take, when DEI is done, don't want to use the word right, but when it's done well and when it's done fairly, it is not about zero sum. Nothing is taken away from anybody. Nobody is victimized. Nobody is put at blame. What it is it's a recognition of historical norms. It's just an acknowledgement of marginalization, which is real, which is, racism is real. People with disabilities continue to be marginalized at one of the largest rates that is still permitted. It's still discrimination against people with disabilities is pervasive. Sure, the ADA exists and it's great and standards are better, but individuals don't have a personal right of action under the ADA. Only the government can enforce it. And so there's a common misconception that, discrimination doesn't exist against people with disabilities or any sort of marginalized group, and it's just plain false. And we need to recognize that discrimination does happen. And how do we address it? Well, we address it by having candid, open conversations about it and how we mitigate it and how we move the needle forward. And if we don't address it, it's never going to change. And not talking about it is the absolute worst thing that anybody can do, because it's permitting it to happen.
You hit on a couple of things there that I think are really important. More than a couple, probably, but immediately you're saying we can all be advocates,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Whether or not our employer is supporting or our community is supporting, we can each individually do things, become more aware, to move the needle, I think was the phrase that you used.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And in that phrase, I think there is the reality that we can't expect that things are going to change immediately, or that
No,
big changes are going to happen,
it takes a long
right?
time. Yeah, change
Yeah.
takes time, but the thing that we can't allow is, I'm not going to change the world. I can only change the world in which I exist in, right? The people that I connect with, my reach only goes so far, but my reach goes somewhere. And if we all, within our circle of influence, do what we can to create change that is helping helping things for the better, lifting up people that maybe didn't have a chance before, or, making sure that the person with a disability isn't ignored or not given a fair chance just because they do things differently. Or, it doesn't matter what the marginalization is. DEI is about, it's about fairness. It's not about everything being the same. It's about fairness. We all start out at the same place, which we don't in life. We don't. And so what it's about is trying to get as close to we can to where we all do get the same sort of it, where it truly is a meritocracy, because it's not, because we don't all start out from the same place. And that's what those initiatives are about. And the pushback against it, it's like, okay, well, what are we trying to do by pushing against DEI? Is it saying that women belong in the kitchen? I don't think so. I think that's offensive to most people, to everybody I know, and to most women. I believe it should be offensive. People's places where they choose it to be for themselves and where they want to be. By saying these programs don't exist or that equity doesn't matter, it's saying that, how it is right now is just fine. And I don't think that that's okay. I think there's a significant number of people that will say, no, things are not just okay. We don't all have a fair shot. And I think we all can do something to try and make the world that we live in a little bit better and a little bit more fair.
I think that call to action is appropriate every day of the year. So thank you for adding that. And you've done a lot, and with NCDA and with other groups as well, to do your part of becoming an advocate and helping get awareness out about resources and needs and help us all to do our jobs a little bit better. And part of that was your work with NCDA's Leadership Academy. I was grateful to be there in San Diego recently, where you gave your presentation from the project that you conducted with that program. You focused on understanding career pathways. Would you like to share something about the recommendations from that project?
So the Leadership Academy was a tremendous experience, first of all, and I'm very grateful to NCDA for allowing me to be a part of it. I bit off a lot more than I thought I was by doing a survey because I had so much data, which
Sure.
I'm incredibly grateful to everyone that responded. But I got almost, at the time, it was almost about a 10% representation of NCDA members, which is a lot of
That's
people.
fantastic.
Um,
Absolutely.
but what it is, it gave a lot of insight and it gave a lot of data that I think NCDA can use to grow as an organization, to try and bring more people that are in the career development space and career practitioners that maybe don't necessarily see themselves as career practitioners into the fold, because anyone that's in career development or as a career practitioner, or even things that might seem ancillary to that, like people that work in vocational rehab or things that are kind of like that, it's all anything that's geared towards employing people and helping them to progress in their careers. It is somebody that I think there's a space in NCDA for. And I'm all about bringing those people in because their voices matter, because they play a role in what NCDA is all about, which is helping people thrive in their career and in their professional development. And I want those voices to be heard. And so my project was about trying to find the ways in which people became NCDA members, like what their past careers were, what their education level is, and that sort of things, and if they like what they're doing also. And the good news is the vast majority of respondents really enjoyed what they did, and they really liked what they did, and they would recommend it to somebody else who was potentially interested in becoming a career practitioner. But it was also great to see that the experience was from all kinds of areas, that people had done pretty much anything you can imagine before becoming career practitioners. There were people that were in IT, people that were in, marketing, that were in finance, and it just runs the gamut. I was in insurance for a long time before I moved into this space. And so we're everywhere. And it's really just about getting what the NCDA, in my view, what the NCDA is about, just needs to get its message out in more spaces so that more people realize, hey, there's something of value at NCDA that I want to be a part of. There's resources there that are important, and I think I think that's an amazing organization, and I want more people to be a part of it.
No, that is so cool. Career development is everywhere. We're
Yeah.
everywhere. Yeah, it's so much part of our lives, very important part of our lives, and of those people that we're working with. So shout out to NCDA and some of the things that are happening there. I appreciate that. Is there anything else, Ken, that you'd like to add in this conversation about how our listeners can support their students and clients who maybe have disabilities, and about the work you've been involved with?
Yeah. So, just to touch on it again, don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't think you always have to get it wrong or have all of the answers. We all have resources. We all have networks. Reach out to them and utilize them I would hope that people would consider me a resource when it comes to this space. And, I don't know everything, but if somebody wasn't sure where to look for a resource within the disability space or whatnot, I would hope that they would be like, oh, wait, I know Ken Meeker. I can reach out to him and see who he knows or what resources there are. That's what it's about, is use your network, use the resources that you have and are aware of, and tap into them and ask questions. That's the only way we learn, we grow, and that's the biggest piece of advice I could say is don't be afraid to reach out and ask. And, if you don't know, you don't know. So ask questions.
Thanks so much, Ken. I think this has been helpful,
Awesome.
certainly for me, and I think our listeners are going to really respond to it as well. Thank you for making us aware of Disability Pride Month and giving us some real practical recommendations for moving forward.
My pleasure. Thank you.